True story, true story. I grew up in the most aggressively anti-French town in Europe, and now I teach French for a living. You can't make it up. Because, it's one thing to be a Franco-French teacher from France. Hello, today we are the Learn the French, welcome to the Alliance Française. Yeah, well, you had it easy, mate. You grew up in that French aquarium. You never had to worry about other cultures or languages. Some of us had to fight to get to where we are, and it made me the French teacher I am today. So I actually grew up in the most anti-French town in Europe, and I'm not sure how things are in the Basque Country these days or in Corsica, where there has been an anti-French sentiment, but where I was, we actually worried about getting beaten up for speaking French in public. So the little racist town where I grew up is called Overijse. It's right near Brussels, where everyone speaks French. And where it gets odd is that Brussels is technically in a Flemish-speaking area. So these are two different languages, if you don't know. There's Flemish and there's French. And the Flemish very often hate the French, particularly where I grew up, and for several reasons. Or the main one being that they speak a language that very few people have an incentive to learn, because let's be honest, it's not a very relevant language. So realistically, you don't really have much of an incentive to learn it. This position of weakness creates resentment, and we enter into a nonsensical situation where they say, just learn our language. Yeah, but it has very little use and there's only so much time in a day. So growing up in this very aggressive and anti-French little town, I was in a very strange environment. Simple things like taking a bus or buying something from a shop were a challenge, especially as children. First, there was a general feeling that you didn't belong, that was palpable every day. All the street signs were in a foreign language, and those that were written in French were often blacked out by spray paint. And even shops had their signs blacked out if they happened to write something in French. In Belgium, buses run by languages, so there's two main companies to represent the two languages. And I don't know if South Africa reached such heights during the apartheid, but Belgium certainly did. So as a French speaker, you want to buy a ticket to go to Brussels or to Wallonia, where they speak French, but you have to get past the bus driver. And I don't know if the bus company Delane specifically trains the bus drivers to demonstrate their hatred towards anyone who's non-Flemish, but it's palpable. They hate you with a vengeance. All through school, and we're talking about 10 years, I took those buses, those dreaded Delane buses. It's hard to describe, but whatever Flemish you use as a non-speaker of Flemish, you get the immediate impression that you're not wanted. There's a biological disgust for your person, because it's not just a matter of extending a diplomatic hand and speaking Flemish. It's not so easy. Even if you do, you're not one of them, and they hate you for it. And it's particularly scary when you're a kid. So public transport is a problem, but also shops. It's hard to ask for basic things like a magazine or buying sweets when you're a kid. And I remember a shop called Spar in the village. Did that man hate kids, French-speaking kids? It was scary. I still remember it. So that was 40 years ago. I'm sure my brother still remembers also, the guy from the Spa. He had a way of looking at us. It was very scary. So you have this impression of being shut out of your environment for language reasons. There's this environment that you can't use, you can't access, because of language reasons, and also because you don't belong. I remember one day I'll never forget, it must have been around election time, a promotional flyer came through the box, and it read, geen Frans, geen Duits en Engels even min. No French, no German, and English even less, in bold letters. I think it was a double A4. This huge poster that came through the mail that told you essentially you weren't wanted. No French, no German, and even less English. You have to imagine receiving this as a family. So we're not wanted? No, you're not. Of course, to add to the fun, there were conflicts with local kids. We got into a few pebble fights with them, the Flemish kids throwing handfuls of gravel at them, and they at us, but nothing too rough though. Then the fair came to town about once a year. And it was as attractive as it was dangerous, because as a kid you're attracted to the bumper cars, the rides, the video games, but it's also when the Flemish nationalist spirit is especially strong. So what do? You go with your mates, but you know that the slightest word of French, you're going to get called out on it, and if it happens to be someone who's had a bit too much to drink, well, it can probably get ugly quite fast. You keep a low profile, you don't speak too much to your friend, and you're sort of whispering to them while you play video games, in French. You don't speak too loud, and you get out of there as quickly as you can. You're the undercover fairgoer. That's what you are. You don't speak French, you just go in, play your video games, and run out. You also can't join any of the sports clubs because they're organised and funded by the Flemish language, and they would never fund anything in French. So you can't go and play football or join any sort of team because you're just not part of it. So when I was 10, I went to the French-speaking Cub Scouts, but of course they couldn't find the funding or even the facilities to organise a proper scout troop. This is hilarious. So what they did was they must have rented some old tumble-down brick shack, a barn in the middle of a muddy field, and you have to picture it was an old white brick building that must have served to, I don't know, to shelter cows or sheep or whatnot, the livestock, and holes in the brick, the tiles falling through, the bricks falling through the what do you call it, holes in the ceiling, in the roof. I don't even know if the thing had a door, and that was our headquarters, in the middle of a muddy field. And I remember vividly the cold and the mud, those two things. I'm quite sure the thing didn't have a door. Those were our Cub Scout headquarters, and the very first activity I remember was one half of the Cubs troop had to prevent the other half from climbing up this muddy field, this muddy slope. That was the game, so there was one half at the top of the slope and the other half trying to climb up, covered in mud. It was just a field of mud, and no funding, of course, no funding. That was the thing, play with mud. That was French-speaking Cub Scouts in Flemish territory, and we were covered in mud from head to toe, and freezing, of course, in our little shorts. But then, of course, things got better when I went to the British Cub Scouts in Tervuren near Brussels at the BSB school, and all of a sudden I found myself in a heated room with a nice clean uniform, and that was the end of that. The paperwork was impossible also where we lived, because they refused to give you anything in French. Things like going to get your driver's license was impossible, asking for any type of form. But it's not just the fact of speaking Flemish, it's the knowledge that they're going to give you an attitude when you walk into the local council, because you walk under the Flemish flag and you think, oh God, here we go. And you're really you're entering the nerve centre, the nerve centre of concentrated hate for anything French speaking. And they just don't like anyone who's not Flemish. So there you go, with your shoddy Flemish, and they look at you blanks. It's a biological hatred. It's unbelievable. I think it's a bit like going to a Hells Angels rally in a suit and tie and saying, well, if I wear a helmet, they're probably going to like me a bit better. No, not really. That's not going to work either. Yeah, so to conclude this video, it's really about growing up in a very tense environment in which everything is made to oppose you. And when I joined my first gym at age 19, my mum said, speak English, no word of French, speak English. He was genuinely, my poor mum was genuinely terrified of me getting beaten up. You have to imagine, you live in a place, you can't go down to the village, the village centre, to the shops. Low key all the way, You're a second-class citizen. It really was second-class citizenship. I'm not making it up. And she was right, by the way, because I made friends with a very nice guy who worked at the gym, and he spoke English and he spoke Flemish, and he was above all these things. And he pointed out to me regularly the true racist, the hardcore racist. And there were two of them I remember vividly. One was a psychobilly, strangely enough, because to my knowledge, psychobilly doesn't really stem from the Flemish culture, but so he's sort of borrowing from whatever. That's another story. But I remember him with his little haircut. They have this flat top and the creeper shoes. And one time I was speaking with my friend in English, because that was our lingua franca. I mean, I couldn't really speak Flemish with him. I knew Flemish, but not that well, so we decided on English. He walked past us one time with clenched jaw, and he could feel him seething, he didn't say hello or goodbye or whatever. And I asked my friend, what's his problem? And he explained to me, he hates us for speaking English. He generally hates us for speaking English. He doesn't like the sound of it. He doesn't like it being in his reality. And the second one was a cop. He was into all sorts of obscure martial arts and strange circles. He had these, this was the 90s, so he has these low circulation martial arts violence magazines that he showed a few times to my friend. He just mixed with very strange circles, and I once saw him in Brussels. He wasn't wearing his police uniform, and I looked at him, I said, wow, okay. You could tell he belonged to really, really strange circles, interested in all sorts of very aggressive martial arts, designed to hurt people, and you could see the hatred all over his face. It was I think people there really live racism as a religion, as a matter of faith, but there were others also apart from those two. And I should point out that of course dating was impossible also, because you couldn't go to the local parties, especially as a teenager when alcohol was part of the mix, and the last thing you want to do is go and speak French there, because of course they'd hear you, and if they'd had a few, you can quickly imagine how it would escalate. So that's my story. Thankfully I escaped to England soon enough, but I battled through it, and it made me the French teacher I am today. I didn't have it as easy as all those French teachers from France. I didn't have it as easy, and I proved my love for the French language beyond the shadow of a doubt. At least I hope so. I hope you liked the video, and my name is Chris. I'll see you soon in a French lesson. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon.